Hi, I am Dr. Barb Rowland, the Director of Academic Assessment at Quincy University. And today I'm going to talk to you about our assessment process over the last couple of years and go through the assessment data so that you are aware of the results that we experienced after our 2 years of evaluating the Bonaventure Program learning outcomes. So this presentation today is just going to kind of give you an overview of the assessment process. We're going to talk about live text data that we gleaned from year one, the changes that we implemented based on that data that we learned from year one. I'll then go over what we learned after we implemented those changes, how our data turned out in year two, the evaluation of those changes that we implemented, what our future goals are, and then I'm going to end with what I think is probably the most important thing that we gleaned from our assessment data this year, and that is what we learned from the critical self-reflection our seniors are submitting as part of their Bonaventure Program portfolio in the BPP 410 class. So very quickly, I just want to hit on the assessment process. I know that this is something that we've talked about since we started our journey with assessment at Quincy University, but just to kind of review how we got to where we are. And that assessment process begins with our evaluation of 3 Bonaventure Program learning outcomes. This year, we decided to focus on critical reasoning, knowledge of diversity, and information literacy. Those became our key learning outcomes for 2020 through 2022. We do have other learning outcomes, Bonaventure learning outcomes that we assess during the year, those coming from our wedge courses, but that was not our main area of concentration. We focused on those 3, knowledge of diversity, critical reasoning, and information literacy. So once we've decided upon those outcomes that we're going to assess, I reach out to faculty members to see who is teaching a course that touches on those learning outcomes, and I upload those assignments into their live text courses. Once the assignment is uploaded into live text, the instructors then tell their students to upload their particular course activity to live text. At the end of the year then, we go back through all of the live text uploads and begin our assessment process. So this is a screen that kind of shows you as an instructor when you log into live text. You're going to see the courses that you have taught over the course of the year, the fall and the spring semester, and you will then see which outcomes were placed into your courses. So you can see on this slide, my English 111 course was evaluating written communication. And so then I would tell my students to upload their assignment to the written communication link in live text. Once students do that, I'm able, as an instructor, to go back in and see all of the students who have uploaded to my class. The list in the center are those who have uploaded. The list on your left are students who have not uploaded. If their name appears in red, that means that they do not have a live text account activated. And so the student or the instructor would need to reach out to me in order to get that student activated with live text. Once all of the student artifacts are uploaded into live text for all the courses from the fall and the spring semester, then I go back in and I will randomly pick 5 students from each class to assess. So not every student from every class is assessed. Live text does not have the complete capability for random selection, so to speak, and so I do see the student names as I am selecting them. However, I don't pay attention to names, and I do randomly just select 5 students. In some cases, there aren't 5, and so we're forced to pick the ones that have uploaded, but in those courses where we have more than 5, I just go through and randomly select students to assess. And so this screen kind of gives you an overview of our assessment uploads from year 1 to year 2. So in the chart on the left, you can see all of the learning outcomes that are entered into live text, starting with written communication, going down to information literacy. The ones with the asterisks beside them are the ones that we focused on specifically for our assessment process, which would be critical reasoning, knowledge of diversity, and information literacy. The first number, where it says number of classes, that is the number of courses that identified as having a critical reasoning or knowledge of diversity component. So I uploaded the critical reasoning the critical reasoning assignment link to 27 courses during 2020 to 2021. If we had 5 student artifacts in all of those courses, that would give us approximately 135 critical reasoning artifacts to assess. We only had 66 out of the possible 135, which is due to not all students uploading, not all instructors identifying for their students that they need to upload, and so we could see that we had a real difficult time getting the number of uploads that we needed. So we really made a push for increasing our number of uploads in year 2, and that is the chart on the right, where you can see that in year 2 we had 33 classes identify with critical reasoning, which gave us 165 possible artifacts to assess. We had 98 that we were able to assess. So moving from that 66 number to the 98 number was a significant gain for us in terms of getting our uploads increased. And you can see that across the board with all of our learning outcomes except for knowledge of diversity. That was the one that we still had difficulty with in year 2. So once the artifacts have been uploaded and I have selected the 5 students in each course to assess, I will assign those students to our evaluators. And so each year we have faculty members volunteer to be part of our evaluation team, and I group them into teams of 3, and all 3 of them then will evaluate or assess the artifacts that have been submitted to live text for that particular academic year. We do go ahead and assess the learning outcomes that we haven't, that we may not be concentrating on. So even though we didn't concentrate on written communication or global perspective, we still did assess those outcomes as well, so we could maintain that data within live text. So once the evaluators have been broken into teams of 3 and the student artifacts have been assigned to them, they end up evaluating approximately 100 artifacts during our assessment institute. The evaluators use the AAC&U value rubrics to assess the artifacts. So all of the evaluators for written communication are using this same value rubric in their assessment process. So when the evaluator logs into live text, they will see the list of students and the outcomes that they are assessing. And this screen represents what the evaluator will see. You can kind of see in the upper left-hand corner there is a document that represents the student artifact, the student assignment. So the evaluator would click on that artifact, then the value rubric populates in the center of the screen, and they are able then to, as you can kind of see in the bottom right-hand corner, able to click on the different criteria and score the criteria based on a 1 through 4. Actually, I think it's a 0 through 4 scale in terms of the criteria and how well that artifact met that criteria. And once all of that is entered in, after we have assessed all of the artifacts, all 3 evaluators from each team have assessed, LiveText then will generate an assessment report for us for each individual learning outcome. So this one on your screen is from Information Literacy, and it breaks down how our students scored in each level of the rubric criteria. And so it's color-coded in an easier way to examine, so we can kind of see where our students are excelling and where they might be lacking in some of those skills listed in the rubric. Then at the bottom, we do get a very, I would call generic overview of our inter-rater reliability. We have learned over the past couple of years that it's not always that easy to understand exactly how LiveText is calculating this, but it does give us a pretty generalized view of how well our evaluators are assessing based on the criteria, how well that they are all kind of meeting that same level of criteria in the evaluation. Once we have those LiveText reports generated, then in the fall, the Academic Assessment Committee will meet, we'll look at the results, and then we decide what areas we need to focus on as we move forward in the next year. So each assessment cycle is a 2-year period. The first year, we conduct our evaluation of the learning outcomes. We think about the results, kind of look at where we are excelling and where we might need to make some improvements, and then we implement those changes in year 2. And so this very quickly goes over what we learned from our first year of assessment data in LiveText for those 3 Bonaventure Program learning outcomes that we assessed. Critical reasoning, information literacy, and knowledge of diversity. So we did have our students scoring very high in many of the areas listed on the rubric. And in critical reasoning and information literacy, we did see an increase in performance from freshman to senior, which is always a nice thing to see. Knowledge of diversity seems to be falling behind. If we're looking at all 3 of those in total, we can see real gains in critical reasoning and information literacy, but knowledge of diversity seemed to struggle a little bit in terms of where our students were scoring and also seeing a progression of scores. Once we looked at that data from LiveText, we did not feel comfortable making changes in student learning. So, for example, HLC wants us to look at our data, see where our students are performing, where they're falling in those categories on the AAC&U value rubrics, and then make changes to the learning environment or the learning process in order to help students score better or maintain those skills that maybe they were lacking on that we identified in year 1. What we found, though, with our data from year 1 is that it may not be as reliable as we would have liked. And that we came to that conclusion based on the inter-rater reliability. There was a marked difference in scoring between the 3 evaluators for each learning outcome. And in talking to the evaluators, we learned that many of them had a very difficult time interpreting the AAC&U value rubrics. We didn't always have quality artifacts that we could assess. And we didn't have an adequate number of artifacts. So, for example, with critical reasoning in year 1, we had only 66 artifacts to assess, and we didn't feel confident making changes in our learning procedures based only on 66 evaluations. And then to add to that, there really just was an overwhelming workload for our evaluators. And so what we thought would be the best possible way to move forward in the assessment process is to actually change the process. And by changing the process and improving our process, then the idea is that we will be at a place in the next year to have more reliable data. So we focused on 5 areas to change in our process as we moved forward in year 2. We wanted to increase the number of uploads into live text, increase the quality of our artifacts that were uploaded so that we could get more scoreable artifacts, especially in information literacy. We didn't have a whole lot of artifacts from sophomores and juniors, and so we wanted to increase the level of submissions in those areas, increase our scoring consistency among our evaluators, and also establish a manageable workload for our evaluators. And then the next couple of slides here really detail for you what we saw once we implemented those changes. And we did see really nice gains after we implemented the changes in our process. As I noted before, we did have an increase in artifacts submitted. We did have an increase in our sophomore and juniors in the information literacy. We did have an increase in the quality of the artifacts that we received and were able to assess. And so overall, if we looked back at year 1, we had 163 artifacts that were uploaded, and in year 2 we had 222. So we felt like we made some positive gains in getting the artifacts uploaded into live text. When it came to increasing the quality of artifacts, that was also a very important element of our process. We wanted to make sure if we were going to make decisions on student learning, that we wanted to make sure that we were assessing artifacts that truly represented student learning and what our students were doing in their classes. And so in year 1, we had 56 critical reasoning artifacts uploaded, and we had 66 uploaded, but we were only able to assess 55 of those 66. So there were several artifacts submitted that just were not scoreable. They were either we couldn't open them, or the assignment just didn't fit with the critical reasoning rubric. In year 2, we had 98 uploads, and 97 of them we were able to assess. So we only had 1 that we were not able to assess. And then you can see how our uploads figured with information literacy and knowledge of diversity as well. Knowledge of diversity was the only one that we didn't see a gain in, and I think that has to do with the rubric itself. But so during that second year of the assessment process in 21-22, we really focused on getting information out to students, getting information out to faculty, making sure that they understood the upload process, that students were more familiar with using live text, that faculty were more familiar and comfortable with it, and we were able to see gains in our uploads. So that was a really a positive outcome from our assessment efforts. So the other part about increasing the consistency of scoring among evaluators, this was another area that was very important to us. We wanted to be able to demonstrate that our evaluators were consistently scoring the rubrics, and that involved understanding what the rubrics were asking for. And so we spent time over the year as a faculty providing workshops and information in the newsletter and in emails that I sent out about the rubrics, how to interpret them, how to understand them. But also, more importantly, I think we spent additional time at the Assessment Institute during the summer norming the rubrics and going over them, and each team was provided with information about the rubrics. They had an opportunity to score some sample papers or sample artifacts and kind of talk amongst themselves where they were having difficulty and how they could interpret some of the criteria. So for example, one of the areas that we struggle with is in knowledge of diversity, and one of the criteria on that rubric is something about students having an appreciation for diversity. And it was very hard for our evaluators to determine by looking at the artifacts if students actually did have an appreciation for diversity. And so our evaluators were able to talk through that and kind of work with themselves in their own group on how they were going to interpret that, which did make a big difference in our consistency of scoring, and we were able to see more consistency in year 2 than we did in year 3, or I'm sorry, in year 1. So I think overall we have worked really hard. The assessment committee, the faculty, the students, we've all put forth an effort to improve the assessment process, and I think we're finally at a point where our process is pretty solid, and moving forward with this year, the 22-23 academic year, I think we'll be able to look at our live text results and have more confidence in what we're seeing in our student achievement levels. We definitely want to continue increasing our student artifacts into live text. We're continuously working on getting those uploads, and I think that the more we do this, the easier it will be for faculty and for students. So I'm pretty confident we'll continue to see some increases in our uploads. We've also started a student newsletter. We've had a faculty assessment newsletter. I started a student assessment newsletter as well to get information out to students about live text, about the Bonaventure Program learning outcomes, about the BPP 410 class, the portfolio that is due as part of their graduation requirements. We are also doing much more training on live text. We're also talking about how we might be able to establish some signature assignments in certain classes that will just be used every time that class is taught, which will make that easier for our faculty. And there will be more information about that coming up. And then also we want to continue to increase the consistency of our scoring among our evaluators. And so we're definitely going to advance our training when it comes to the Assessment Institute in the summer, and continue to make faculty more aware of the AAC and U-value rubrics, and understanding what those rubrics are asking. So there's one last element that I wanted to add to this presentation today, and I think probably for me this is the most important aspect of our assessment process that we have learned over the last 2 years. Students are required to submit the Bonaventure Program portfolio as part of their graduation requirements. So in their senior year, before graduation, they take the BPP 410 course, which helps them construct their portfolio. We decided to, as part of that portfolio then, students are to submit a critical reflection essay where they reflect not on their time at QU, not on their experience at QU as a whole, but specifically reflecting on their engagement with the Bonaventure Program learning outcomes. And we wanted to know what their thoughts were about their learning experience at Quincy University. And so we examined 100 of those critical self-reflection essays from fall 2019 to fall 2020. We conducted a qualitative study that looked at themes emerging from those critical reflection essays by doing some cycled coding, and what we found was just absolutely, I think, the cherry on top for all of our hard work with assessment and our hard work at Quincy University. So what we looked at was we wanted students to reflect upon their connections between the Bonaventure learning outcomes and their major. So what were they majoring in, and how did they see the outcomes fitting in with their major? How did engaging in the Bonaventure outcomes help them grow as learners? How did it prepare them for their chosen career field? And how did it prepare them to enact social change? So when we were looking over those 100 critical reflection essays, we looked for themes in these 4 areas and what students were saying about how they grew as learners, how they were prepared for their career, and how they have been prepared to enact social change. And again, we had those 100 critical reflection essays from our students in the BPP 410 class. We did 3 cycles of coding to uncover the themes that students, that emerged from the students' voices, which I think was probably the most fascinating, interesting, and fun part of it all, because this was actually what students were saying in their own narrative, in their own voice about their learning experiences at Quincy University. And overall, they overwhelmingly believe that their engagement with the Bonaventure Program learning outcomes have had a significant impact on their learning, on their growth as learners, and on their preparation for their field once they leave Quincy University. And so here are 5 key elements that we derived from that reflection essay. Students believe that the Bonaventure learning outcomes have had a profound effect on their learning. They believe that they have been adequately prepared to be successful within their career fields. They have a renewed sense of passion and excitement for their chosen careers. They have been inspired and challenged to continue their learning beyond Quincy University. And they do believe that learning is an ongoing process that is essential for their growth and their success in their career fields. And this is the part that was, like I said, so fun and amazing to read about from our students. They really believed that their time here at Quincy University has been a time of preparation for their career, but also has been a time for them to reflect upon themselves, upon their learning experiences, and they're now prepared to enter the world and become leaders that enact social change. They believe, as they are leaving Quincy University, that they are better learners and humans. And those were words that they used, which I found so fascinating. They believe now they're able to see things from different perspectives. They can keep an open mind about various topics. They consider the thoughts and feelings of others, and they refrain from making judgments before drawing conclusions. They also recognize that in the workplace they're going to be called to be problem solvers, critical thinkers, effective communicators. Really, they listed all of the Bonaventure Program learning outcomes and how all of them would play a role in their lives once they left Quincy University, not just in their career, but in life in general. They recognize that they'll be called upon to make reasonable and logical decisions in the workplace and in the world, in their lives. They believe that these skills will distinguish them as leaders in the workplace and in their fields. And they believe, as I said before, that they are now prepared to become leaders to enact social change. With that being said, I think it's important to note that there were, out of the 100, there were 2 critical self-reflection essays that did not have a favorable response as the other 98 did. And that's common. You will always see a few students who just haven't had quite the same experience. And these students mentioned that they didn't really feel like they gained anything from their time at QU, particularly working with the Bonaventure Program learning outcomes. One student noted specifically that they did not feel confident in their ability to work and believed that their experiences got worse and more difficult over time. Another student said that they do not believe Quincy University helped them learn wonderful things about their career. But yet those same students believed that they did succeed or did have some success at Quincy University. And so I think that it's important for us to recognize these thoughts and keep them in consideration as we move forward. I know that we're not always going to have positive comments from every student, but it's important to know what our students are saying as we move forward and hopefully be able to change their experiences. So conclusions from the critical reflection qualitative study is that this essay does give students a time to reflect on their experiences with the Bonaventure program. It explains how their experiences have affected them as learners and as leaders. It clarified their experiences with the Bonaventure learning outcomes, and I think that's probably the part that excites me the most, because we look at those Bonaventure program learning outcomes individually. For example, we focused on those 3 over the last 2 years, and we think about them in isolation, but in totality they all work together and they all form the learning experience that our students have at Quincy University. And in their own words, in this critical reflection essay, they get it, they understand it, and they are putting all of those pieces together. And I think that's what makes our whole assessment process, kind of closes the loop in our assessment endeavors. And it demonstrates that we are doing what we want our assessment process to do. Yes, we still have changes that might need to be made. We still have things that we can continue to improve upon, but we are moving in the right direction. I'm confident in what we have accomplished in the last couple of years. You should all be very proud of the work that you have done, the work that your students have done. I'm very thankful. I'm very blessed to work with such a great faculty, and I can't wait to see how things transpire this summer. If you have questions about any of the results that I've shared, please reach out to me. You can email me, stop by my office, stop me in the hallway. I am happy to talk about it with you or clarify or provide you with some additional data that you feel might be necessary in helping you understand our process and our assessment over the last couple of years. I also respect and want to hear your thoughts and opinions about what we're doing and how we can improve upon our processes. And I would also like to extend an invitation to all of you to be evaluators at our Assessment Institute in June this year. I think it's the best opportunity to learn about assessment at Quincy University and see what our students are doing. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.